The following is a conversation with John Faig, a top voice in educational technology, a startup mentor, and an AI enthusiast, who also serves as a RevOps consultant. With his unique blend of business, technical, and educational expertise, John shares invaluable insights on becoming a data-driven company and the crucial role of relentless experimentation in the thriving world of EdTech. In this second part, we dive into managing the buyer journey in EdTech. We talk about the importance of touchpoints, branding, and navigating the sales funnel. John also shares practical advice on experimenting with different go-to-market strategies and emphasizes patience and strategic planning. Plus, he compares the EdTech markets in the US and Europe, shedding light on the bureaucratic hurdles and the complexities of getting products approved and into schools. So, if you're looking to flip your EdTech struggles into triumphs, this is the episode you cannot afford to miss.
This whole process of finding value proposition for specific personas, building personas, managing your sales funnel, this all sounds, honestly, this sounds overwhelming. And I know that because I've been in B2B sales for a long time, and I know that it can be overwhelming, especially if you don't have big team behind you. And how often do you work with like single founders or maybe team of 2 or 3 people? And maybe we need like 10 or 15 people to start with in your startup?
Yeah. So just based on relationships and accelerators that I've been associated with, a lot of the companies that I've worked with traditionally were in less than 5 employees, 1, 2, or 3. And they're often bootstrapped. So they have the biggest challenge because they often either don't know about the RevOps tools they should be implementing, or don't know which ones, or don't have the money to do so, right? So the problem is I'm going to start to try to work with larger audiences because I think there's a critical mass that companies should be, because I believe the automation is real key, right? Especially in a small company where resources are constrained. You can't do everything manually. One of the challenges I see is small companies try to do everything themselves to avoid spending money. The problem is they need automation more than anybody because they don't have anybody in key roles. They have, they're wearing multiple hats. And so that's where you want to put in the automation, because you can automate a good chunk of that customer journey, right? You can automate some user research, not all of it, but some of it, right? So user research shouldn't be a founder picking up the phone or doing a Zoom with somebody. It should be a part of it. There should be multiples, right? There should be a brief survey sent out electronically, a more comprehensive sent out, book me for a 15-minute chat. So you want to have automation in everything you do. And I see a big problem with startups is that they try to do everything manually. Also, I talked about data driving a company, right? In particular, driving an EdTech company. The data should define your week, right? So the data will help you figure out where to spend your time. I've seen lots of founders take their calendar and put big chunks of time on stuff. And I'm like, well, how do you know that conversation with your development folks is better than you speaking at a conference or doing a webinar? And so the reason you wouldn't meet with your product development folks is because it's a less priority, at least for this week or this month, than the other things, right? And I have not seen too many companies where the feature set or the product itself is the problem. In a handful of cases, it might be buggy, it's fine. You're probably doing pilots anyway, so people will give you some grace. But the data tells you where to spend your time. If you have no market awareness, if you have no brand established, you should be spending no time on the product, right? Why would you? Nobody's listening. right? So your week that has all these little things, meeting here, customer support here, bug fixes there, and here's a little bit of marketing, and here's a little bit of sales, here's some user research, that can be automatically filled by looking at the data. Do you need more user research? Maybe, maybe not. Do you need more brand building? Maybe, maybe not. Most time, companies continue to do that.
What tools do you recommend for measuring this data or capturing it? I guess it's not single tool, but
so there's a huge
tool set.
there's a huge eye chart that I have that remind me afterwards. I'll show you. It's a PDF that literally has 500 icons, and it's called the RevOps landscape. There is outbound marketing tools. There's inbound marketing tools. There's customer success. There's customer engagement. There's community building. There's customer support. And those are all the tools that you could have in broad brush to manage things. And what you really need to do is, if you have multiple tools, you're automatically capturing the customer journey because it's strung across those, right? And your website, right? You have an outbound marketing campaign. How do you know it's working? Well, there's a click rate, there's an open rate, there's a click rate as a link, and then there's a landing page on your website, probably multiple. So people go to different landing pages, and then there's calls to action. Fill out this form, download this video, download this white paper, whatever. So in conjunction with those RevOps tools, your website, you're going to get a pretty good look at the customer journey, and you're going to keep optimizing it until you get there. But I don't think anybody can really fast track or compress the customer journey in EdTech because it is B2B to C, right?
Yes.
You could go after the teachers, which I think is only good as a seeding strategy. It's not good because they don't have money, and they're not the only people's problems you need to solve. So I don't mind going after teachers as a seeding strategy, but at least in the newfangled AI tools, you find that they're charging $5 a month or something. I mean, it's really selling to teachers is challenging. That's not a problem if, as part of your go-to-market strategy, your business model can survive on that.
Yeah.
To me, that's just not going to be enough money to do marketing. It feels like it's gonna support the SaaS infrastructure, but most markets come down to marketing, right? The best product rarely wins. I can't think of many examples where the best product won because they felt overconfident and didn't market, and it's usually the second or third product that wasn't as good, but knew it wasn't as good and tried to use marketing to paper over the feature deficiencies, right? So I can't recommend selling to teachers solely. The challenge that people come is or ask me, okay, so selling to teachers is not what I can build my business on. It's a seeding strategy. It's fine. Seeding strategies are great. Teachers are easy to find. That doesn't mean you're going to get product market fit with them necessarily because of what I mentioned before, like they use the product irregularly, they use it sporadically, they associate it with a unit, they whatever. There's only a couple ways you can show value to buyers, and that's really some sort of data dashboard where you can say, hey, this portion of my teachers is using my product, or hey, this portion of teachers is using my product and this is the impact they're having on education, right? So that's really what a principal and superintendent cares about. And those priorities vary by district and school, but they're not hard to find out. You go to their website and you read the minutes, you look at some of the initiatives they have, you read the board minutes. I mean, that stuff is not rocket science. So you can know that. And then you would craft the dashboard to say, hey, if these folks are really focused on social emotional learning, there you go. These folks are focused on STEM. These guys are into AI with students. These guys have awful math scores and are under tremendous pressure to raise them. This school type has reading deficiencies and they're under pressure for that. So it's not impossible to demonstrate value to the buyer. You just need to be sensitive to what their priorities are.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, then you need to have at least a decent amount of teachers in the school, a beachhead, before that data would be meaningful. And then you could approach the principal or superintendent and say, hey, we have 20 to 50, 70% of the school, your teachers are using this, and the teachers are getting this uplift in whatever achievement, engagement,
Mm-hmm.
Some sort of metric that.
But still, you have to measure. If you don't measure, you don't have the metrics, and you can't show.
A data-driven company has been around in other industries for a long time, but it's absolutely critical in EdTech, because I spend a lot of time reviewing people's go-to-market strategies, and they invariably want me to craft it for them. And so the conversation usually goes something like, "Hey, you talk and work with a lot of companies. You must know lots of go-to-market strategies." And I say, "Yeah, probably 400 to 500."
Mm-hmm.
And they say, "Which one's going to work for me?" And I say, "None of them."
None of them.
Because EdTech companies are idiosyncratic, and you're launching a product at a point in time with a competitive landscape, with moving priorities. So, launching a product in July 2024 is different than 2023. It's different than December. It's different in different parts of the country and the world. I mean, that's why the experimentation is so important, because I can tell you what to do, but I can't predict how well it's going to work or how fast. But if you experiment and do more of what works and less of what doesn't, for example, customer segmentation. So a lot of companies today that have an AI tailwind behind them have probably gotten more customers than they deserve, right? That's the nature of it. You tap into an overarching trend, and that's good for you. That's free marketing. However, they have signed up maybe more customers than they should have. So, what do they need to know? Well, data-driven says you at least need to know four customer segments, right? The best one is high usage and they're paying, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the best. Then there's low usage and they're paying. Those guys are a risk to churn off your platform. And then there's those same categories, high usage and low usage, and they're not paying. They're on the free trial, right? Mm-hmm. So at the very least, you need to have 4 strategies, because those 4 people need different levels of support and engagement, right? So at the very least, you have 4 things you need to worry about. And so that's just a very simple example of fairly basic data that every company should have and be working on. And all 4 of those are distinct. And I could probably, if the company had tens of thousands of users, not hundreds of thousands, there's probably additional buckets in there, right? Mm-hmm. There's people who are high users who pay and also referred people. Okay, they're in another bucket, right? So it really is just about collecting data on user behavior, the customer journey, feedback data. Obviously user voice is helpful, features they'd like to see, although that's not an automatic thing for me, right? You don't want to bloat your product or introduce features that are, not value added, right? So how do you find value added? Well, you need to talk to engaged customers to know how important that feature is, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not obvious how you do user research. It takes practice. So if you're talking to a customer about a product and a new feature, the answer is always going to be yes. Oh, I really need that, and you really need that. Well, but if you can put some parameters around that, say, well, do you really need it? How often would you use it? And okay, if we're going to introduce this, we're going to remove another feature. So what would you feel like? What's your current favorite feature? What would you feel like if we didn't? So you can sort of gauge value by being a crafty researcher. In addition, one of the things that you asked at the onset is mistakes that companies make. They don't do a great job during user research of ferreting out what people will pay for the product. How valuable is this? And that's not a question you could say, how much would you pay for this? There's other ways to say how how much you would pay for this. There's pricing proximity. There's comparisons with other products that you know the price of. Well, is this better than this product or that product? Or I know they're different, but do you see relative value? So EdTech companies get in the situation where they don't know how valuable their product is, and they don't know what customers will pay for it. And that stuff is the most important piece of information you get from user research. The critical features, and that'll be borne out by the user data, the behavioral data, and then the value, what they will pay for. And there's products that I pay for now, and I'm like, wow, they underpriced that. I mean, it's like, I would pay more for that because I look at all the products, all 36, and I can rank them from least to most expensive, and I can see companies that are either overpriced or underpriced based on their value. And I'm like, these guys did a really poor job of price discovery. And so it's happening a lot.
Yeah, because probably when you're building something, you're thinking about your costs. And first of all, the first thing that comes to your mind setting a price for a customer is, what is my cost? And I have to have the margin on it, and that's all. And you should, from what you're saying, you should more focus on the value pricing, or the pricing based on a client's value, or the customers or students here.
Absolutely. I mean, I was a financial analyst for 20 years, and I can tell you in enterprise software, the biggest line item was sales and marketing, not research and development, right? So you can't just infer the price, the price of your platform and development to be, the overall cost. That is going to be far less than the sales and marketing and customer support. It's going to be bigger by 2 or 3 times. So you need to include that, because part of your go-to-market strategy says that I'm also selling a business model.
Right.
And your product market fit will accept or reject that. And part of product market fit is the business model, right? You can't actually evaluate the business model to say you've achieved some milestone and now it's okay to scale the business, which is kind of what product market fit explains. You can't necessarily do that if you're not accounting for at least what you anticipate to be the cost of finding and obtaining a buyer. That's why people go to teachers, because they're easy to find. Well, that doesn't mean anything. That just means you've chosen a channel that's incredibly low margin because they have no money. So you've chosen, that's a channel strategy, to go for people who have very little money. It's not a great strategy. A handful of companies will probably be able to pull it off. The vast majority will not. And in EdTech, your chance of survival is pretty low, maybe 5%. And so, if you don't make any of the mistakes I've outlined, your chances are, maybe close to 5%. But if you make one or more of the things we've just talked about, I mean, you're almost down to 0.
Would you maybe, it's a mistake for startups, for EdTech startups in particular, to focus on schools at all. Maybe the most successful startups will be those who will focus on direct client, like, I don't know, Udemy, like Coursera, Masterclass, and so on. They are not focusing on selling to schools. So is this model like doomed? Shouldn't we sell to schools because it's too difficult?
Well, currently, schools are not a very big EdTech market, right? If you totaled up the largest EdTech vendors, they're probably the LMS vendors. And then there's some other vendors that sell accounting systems to schools and student information systems. So if you take the major systems that a school buys and total up that revenue, it's not huge. There's only there's only 5 to 10 public companies. So currently the dollars spent in this space is not huge, even though everybody's total available market graph has this huge number. The answer is no. Things are already apportioned. The textbooks get this amount, the systems get this, and then we have a little bit of money left over for new systems, right? So one is, it's not a really huge market. I would also say that just thinking about this, people default to the fields they come from. If you came from higher ed, you're probably going to try to sell to them. If you came from K-12, or you think that's where the problems are, you'll try to sell there. I think a first step before you get into the mode of learning you're going to sell to is to think about your product as a generic learning product, right? This is what it's going to do. And then you think, who has the biggest problem that I'm solving? K-12, higher ed, businesses, right? So I actually think that people jump into the target market too quickly without necessarily thinking about the nature of their product for a little bit to say, okay, this product, okay, it's kind of support heavy, it's complicated. Maybe that's higher ed, not K-12 or workplace, or there's a viral component. So maybe that'll work in K-12. Maybe we'll get enough people to make referral sales. So I just think it's a worthwhile step to think about the nature of your product from a learning perspective, and not just, I think people land in one of the three buckets and then start building a product. That's like, parachuting out of a plane, and then, wherever you land, you're going to build the house that you have the blueprints for. I'm like, that could work, but I think maybe you think about where you'd like to build first and make sure it aligns with your blueprints, and then you think about which of those three modes. And I would add a fourth one too. Consumers, parents, right? So, those are four market segments that you could sell into. And it's probably too much, unless you're really well funded, to maybe try a little bit of a go-to-market strategy in higher ed and K-12, right? When I say multiple go-to-market strategies, I'm thinking about a segment, right? I'm thinking about like different teacher personas, different types of schools, I'm not different pricing models. I'm not thinking about all of these. But if you're in K-12, it's not outrageous to maybe go to parents as well. Maybe there's a module you can sell to parents that makes the value of the product that the teachers use higher. So I just think that you need to think about who you can provide value to fastest and where's the greatest value. And you have to verify that in the user research. You have to have people's eyes light up, because once you get down to the what's and the pricing, it's different. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a skateboarder and I describe a car to you and you're like, this is amazing. Like, I can travel with friends. If it's raining, it doesn't matter. This is amazing. It looks like more fun. There's a radio. This car thing you're describing is so much better than my skateboard. I would buy it if it was here today. And then we'd probably have a discussion on maybe how much could you afford and what do you do and whatever, because you might not be my target market, but you're excited. That's the first thing. That's the first step in attraction of prospects, is they're excited about it. They have to have a propensity that they want it, because that'll make the sales cycle easier. If you have to convince them every step of the way, pulling them, then that's where the long sales cycle comes. If they're already somewhat predisposed and interested about your product, they've already thought, wow, this thing, I could run a business out of my car. I could do an Uber. I could. There's lots of possibilities. Okay, that's where it starts. That I've described a vision to you. That's kind of the why. Why do you need it? Because you can take other people, you can get faster, you can do more things, whatever. Okay, then reality sets in. Then we have a conversation with the what's, and then your enthusiasm, which was amazing, is somewhat lower. It's probably not zero, but it for sure lowers, because I tell you the cost and you're like, ooh, that's a lot. And I was like, well, you got to get insurance and it's got to take gas. And you're like, ooh, wow. And it's like, then you have to get a license, right? You have to, prove that you can drive it. And there's upkeep, and there's a risk it gets stolen, and there's a risk you get into an accident. And then you're like, oh, Jesus. Some people will say, that's okay. I still love the idea. I can still use this. Other people, their perceived value with what will be realized value is closer, and it's not a big gap. And so in that case, they say, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll wait a couple years and we'll see if the price comes down.